Good evening, everyone. Namaste and welcome, everyone. Namaste, Sraddhalu.
Namaste.
Namaste, Sampadananda. We continue today our explorations on the theme of Sanskrit language. And today we have the privilege to have with us Dr. Sampadananda Mishra, who will be sharing his insights, and as well he will answer our questions. So you may feel free to ask questions in the chat box during our conversation. And we invite also Sraddhalu to address a few questions directly. Namaste and welcome.
Namaste. Namaste. Dr. Sampadananda Mishra is very renowned in the field of Sanskrit, and unfortunately I am not the best person to introduce him either for this, but just a brief glimpse. I've put his entire biodata on the description box so that those of you who would really like to get a full scope of his work will get an idea there. But just to give you a first general introduction, that he grew up with Sanskrit language that was seeped into his consciousness, in his mind, from the family lineage and tradition itself. And he came to know of Sri Aurobindo, and that was the bridging which brought out this extraordinary work that he has been doing. He has he's very well known in the field and has received several national awards from the government, particularly the President's Award, which is called Maharshi Badarayana Vyasa Samman in 2011 for outstanding contribution to Sanskrit, and Senior Fellowship Award from the Ministry of Culture. And that shows the scope of the influence that he has had on a national level, and particularly that was for his research on the Vedic art of multiple concentration. He has also served as associate editor for the collected works of Ganapati Muni. This is something I had mentioned last time, perhaps some of the work of Ganapati Muni, and it was an extraordinary thing which he did, and I was part of it in the sense that I was responsible for initiating the thing, and we had nobody who was competent enough to really do that work of editing. It was a very difficult job to go through the actual manuscripts and put it all together, and basically Sampadananda and his wife did all this on their own, alone, the entire 12 volumes of the collected works, without which it would not have been completed in time or with this level of excellence and competence. He has also earned many other literary excellence awards from Junior Chamber International India and various others. I have put the full list in the biodata which is put up there. But for me, what is most important when I think of Sampadananda and the work that he has done is his extraordinary contribution to bringing the knowledge that Sri Aurobindo has brought of the Sanskrit root sounds and the structure of the language itself into a domain which is not merely scholarly but which is lived. There are people who will read those texts, make studies and perhaps write papers. That's not very useful unless you live what the root sounds represent and the language itself flows with the thinking which is aligned to the root sounds. And this is not the case even for some of the very famous Sanskrit scholars today. So for me, Sampad's most special feature is precisely that he has internalized the root sounds and has actually shaped his working of the Sanskrit language from that. And therefore, before we take up the questions which are already there from many of you, and we have compiled them over the last few sessions, I would like to ask my own questions, and then we will turn to the questions that have come from our viewers. Meanwhile, those of you who would like to ask some questions, you can put it in the chat box. So my first question to Sampadananda is, how did you discover this beauty and wonder of Sanskrit, and what part came from the traditional teaching, and what was the additional new content that the exposure to Sri Aurobindo brought for you?
Namaskar to all of you, and many thanks to Sraddhalu ji for organizing this series of lectures or discussions on exploring Sanskrit, especially in the light of Sri Aurobindo. So I have been watching all these uh, lectures, though I haven't completed all the previous 7, but I have gone up to the 4th lecture, and I will be completing soon the rest of the 3. Uh, this is something, a topic, as it was mentioned during the introduction, that very, very dear to my heart, and I put a lot of effort. I keep pursuing this, what Sri Aurobindo and the mother have spoken about Sanskritam for a long time. And my journey started right from my childhood when my grandfather had introduced me to this beautiful language. And most importantly, he not only asked me to by heart the shlokas, the different stutis, but he always asked me to feel the vibration, the purity of the sounds. He gave a lot of importance to the purity of the sound. And he said, these pure sounds of Sanskritam are immensely powerful to purify and refine your consciousness. That was something very, impactful for me right from my childhood. How each and every word, it evokes, or it evokes a very deeper sense of the whole universe, the purity, harmony, beauty, and wonder. So it was a very different experience with Sanskritam. Though I was familiar only with 2 languages, Odia, my mother tongue, and Sanskritam. And I kept it alive till the end, and started learning English much later after I came to Pondicherry. So the traditional learning through Odia medium and Sanskrit medium was very fulfilling in the sense that I was in contact always with, as per my grandfather's advice and his guidance, always maintained that purity of feeling the vibration, feeling the purity of the sound. And it did much good to my understanding, my consciousness. So sometimes after coming to Sri Aurobindo, I felt that I was getting prepared by my grandfather to come to Pondicherry. That was the feeling. And I had no idea about Sri Aurobindo. I had no idea about their yoga. Just heard the name, though in Odisha, there are a lot of devotees, a lot of centers, but my village had no access to it, or no one in my village talked about it. So when I came to Pondicherry and started reading little bit of Sri Aurobindo, though it was very, very difficult for me, I didn't know much English. But the mother's language was very simple, so I started reading the mother. And what she spoke about Sanskritam, that was very, very revealing. And that paved the path to enter into Sri Aurobindo's, that oceanic vastness of Sri Aurobindo, or depth of Sri Aurobindo. So it was through the mother, the work became very, very easy. And the day I read that statement of the mother, that as every child born in France has to learn French, so every child born in India must know Sanskritam. So that was the day when my sankalpa and my sankalpa became very clear, very strong. And then I got the clarity what is my work here on the earth, my purpose of life, to take Sanskritam to as many children as possible, which I have been doing through various ways. But there was a difference. The traditional learning gave some understanding. But after coming to Sri Aurobindo, the whole perspective got changed. He always gives a new, like new way of looking at things, completely new way, which I never heard from anyone, never learned from anyone. I read Kalidas, but Kalidas made sense to me after reading Sri Aurobindo. Bhartrihari made more sense to me after reading Sri Aurobindo. But he has spoken not just about Bhartrihari, but how he has interpreted and transcreated the verses of Bhartrihari. Beautiful. His Niti Shatakam had a lot of impact on me. So it helped me learning English. It helped me going deep into the essence, the spirit of the language, as Sri Aurobindo always has put stress. Even the mother also speaks that we have to have a Sanskritam which, you know, carries this sense of root sounds and which has the, which carries the spirit and the flavor of the language. So learning the language, using the language for communication is one thing, but using the language with awareness is something which I learned from Sri Aurobindo and the mother, that we have to use the language with awareness. And that becomes a very different experience. Then the meanings start revealing the deeper meanings. Like we carry some dictionary meanings while reading certain things, but there are layers and layers of meanings of a particular word. And that is the most wonderful aspect of Sanskrit. That various senses of a particular word, they get revealed to the person who does this Shabda Sadhana. So after coming to Sri Aurobindo and the mother, I started doing this Shabda Sadhana. Pick up a particular word. I always remembered, I found this Sanskrit background was a great help in getting into the depth of Sri Aurobindo, the depth with which Sri Aurobindo speaks of the Vedas, of the Upanishads, of the Gita, of yoga, of Sanskriti. And at the same time, Sri Aurobindo became a great help in diving deep into these texts, the traditional texts. So for me, it was a very beautiful journey. And I always remember while reading Sri Aurobindo, something of the Veda, of the Upanishad, of Tantra, of Shankaracharya, it will pop up. So when, like the mother speaks of the sound, she even speaks of that the language that we need has to be a completely new language. He says that we need a new language. We need to create a new language, he says. Not something like an Esperanto, but a language which comes straight from above, reverberating. So then I, remembered what I studied in the Patanjali's Mahabhashya, where he says, very beautiful statement he makes. He says, Eka Shabda, a single word, Samyak Jnata, thoroughly known, Suprayukta, consciously put into practice, Swarge Loke cha Kamadhuk Bhavati. So it yields much result here and hereafter. He speaks of a single word, Eka Shabda. Even a single word can uplift us and lead us to that state of enlightenment is something which is the experience, is the realization of the Rishi tradition. That was the most wonderful thing to discover in the tradition and in Aurobindo. So that's how my journey started, and then I keep doing this Shabda Sadhana, pick up a particular word, and that word also, like, sometimes while going through certain texts, so it really, like, calls that, okay, pick me up. So I'm there with you. Something like that, like it's a kind of intimacy grows with the word itself. That word becomes a part of the integral part of the consciousness. Then there is a long contemplation which goes on till it reveals its own meaning. Tanum vivrunate swam. So that's what the Veda says, that the word itself reveals its own body to the sadhaka. Whoever does this sadhana contemplates on it. So this is how the whole journey has been so far.
And this is particularly true in the Sanskrit language because of the structure of root sounds, that the word is self-revelatory. And this word Shabda Sadhana, which he used, I just want to elaborate for some of our viewers who may not follow the Sanskrit term. It is literally the concentrated focus on the word to let the word reveal its deeper import, not merely etymologically, but also its psycho-spiritual content. And I'm hoping we will have a few examples of certain words like this, which again, I come to this particular thing, I am highlighting this because this is not done by Sanskrit scholars normally. And this is something very distinctly unique which I see in Sampadananda's work, in his life. First of all, he is a sadhaka, which is not the case with most Sanskrit scholars. They often have a religious side, but they don't have the aspect of conscious sadhana. Second, he comes within the framework of the integral yoga, which is much more complex and complete and rich. Third, he comes from the background of the root sounds that Sri Aurobindo and the etymological structure that Sri Aurobindo reveals of the language. And then into that, when you dwell on it, what it gives you as an insight is almost a development of the intuition and the intuitive insight that comes with the word, which is so special in Sampadananda's work. So I'm actually waiting for him to present some of this. For those of you who are interested, he is actually going to start a course online which is precisely dwelling on these words, and I've put a link to that in the description box for today's discussion. It's an online certificate course called Understanding Sanskrit Untranslatables, a consciousness-based approach to unlock wisdom of ancient Indian texts, where he will be sharing precisely the discoveries that he has made in this kind of a quest and concentration. I'm particularly attracted to this observation you made, that you better understood Kalidasa and Bhartrihari after reading Sri Aurobindo. That means other scholars who are actually scholars of Kalidasa would not have that understanding and depth of appreciation if they have not read Sri Aurobindo. Can you give an example of what that can be like?
Yeah, I mean, I would not say that other scholars do not have that kind of deeper understanding. So they may be having one layer of understanding which I may not have, because they also have been, doing in their own way. They have their own sincerity and their own sadhana in pursuing. But the clarity that I get from Sri Aurobindo, so especially while explaining Kalidasa's words to the European minds, so when one reads his writing on translating Kalidas or on translating Upanishads, so we get the most beautiful examples. Say we read translations, most of the people they read because they do not have much Sanskrit knowledge. So to read Kalidas or Bhartrihari, they read it through translation. And most of the translators have done much injustice to the works of Sri Aurobindo, to the works of Kalidas, Bhartrihari, and many others. And Sri Aurobindo says that translating Sanskrit into any European language is an impossibility. He puts that word, an impossibility. He said, what best can be done is can be interpreted. The same word can be interpreted. And based on his writings, one can even develop a new theory of translation. Like how to translate.
Very interesting.
Yes. So I'll give certain examples here. Say, Bhartrihari uses the word Chhatram. Chhatrena Surya Tapu. So there is a verse which comes, which has this line, as we are protected or one is protected from the sun by using an umbrella. So the word Chhatra is invariably translated by every translator as Chhatra. Umbrella. The original word is Chhatra in Sanskrit. But Sri Aurobindo would not do that mistake of translating the word Chhatra into umbrella. Umbrella can be Chhatra, but Chhatra is not umbrella. So he always gives a lot of importance to the root sense. The word Chhatra comes from the root sound Chhad, which means to cover. When we say umbrella, we confine the word into a particular image, like the umbrella looks like this. Sri Aurobindo would not bring that confinement to the word. Because suppose I'm walking, I do not have an umbrella, I have a newspaper in my hand, I can put that on my head to protect my head from the sun. So that becomes the Chhatram during that time. So anything that covers. So Sri Aurobindo uses the word shade or covering, not umbrella.
Interesting.
That's how in Sri Aurobindo one doesn't find a constricted sense of anything. Neither of the word, nor of the concept, nor even of the philosophy or the religion or anything. One doesn't find a constricted, limited sense of anything. He immediately opens up the whole, ocean before oneself. Another example I'll give you of Kalidas. While translating, so that is a particular word because Kalidas is famous for his simile. Upama Kalidasasya. That's how the saying goes, that Kalidas, no one can match with Kalidas in the matter of simile. So at one place in Meghadutam, Kalidasa uses the word Pakwa Bimba Dharushti. So it means Pakwa means ripen, Bimba, Adhara, Oshtha. Adhara is Adhara Oshtha, because Adhara is also Oshtha, lips. Oshtha is also lips, but Adharoshtha is the lower lip. Okay. So usually what is seen projected outside is the lower lip. Okay. That becomes prominent. So it says that Pakva Bimba Dharoshti, the Adharoshta, the lower lip, looks like the Bimba fruit. But if it is translated as her lips are like Bimba fruit, or Bimba, if it is translated into English, say cherries, it sounds very ridiculous. That's what Sri Aurobindo says, that how can we say, how do we translate this? This is the most untranslatable aspect of any language. Every language has untranslatables. But Sanskritam, to the degree which, to which Sanskritam has the untranslatables, no other language has.
That's because the Sanskrit language is not tying you to an object, it is describing the qualitative operation of the object at all times.
Yeah.
So it could be understood in any operation that, or any function, or any object that has that function could take its place. And you can never translate that fully.
Yes, because the object is not permanent.
Mm-hmm.
It may decay, it may change.
So the psychological function is what is primary.
Yeah.
So how does Sri Aurobindo translate this?
The properties, the gunas of the object are Shashvata, Chirantana. And here is a language which always deals with the Shashvata, Chirantana, the eternal. That's why it is an eternal and universal language. It helps us to discover the sacredness of life. That's why it's a sacred language. So
how does he translate this one?
Sri Aurobindo translates it in a very different way. He neither says her lips are like bimba fruit nor like cherry. So he simply puts her lips a fruit red and ripe. That's all. So the simile is used to give expression to the redness and the komalata, the softness, but at the same time the fullness, the maturity of the object. So that is what is explained or interpreted in the translation, not the word itself. That's why word by word translation, the Abhidhanic translation, it doesn't help. It doesn't bring out the spirit of the language.
And this cannot be done by the artificial intelligence translations at all.
No, not at all.
That would be a disaster.
Not at all.
Yes.
So that is why consciousness matters. So, and there are plenty of such examples that one finds while going through the interpretation of Sri Aurobindo of the Veda, of the Upanishad, of Kalidas, of Bhartrihari, of Ramayana, of Mahabharata, and many such words. And sometimes, like I did make a count of how many Sanskrit words Sri Aurobindo has used as the words are, not using an equivalent of it. More than 2000 Sanskrit words one finds in the entire work of Sri Aurobindo. They are used as they are.
Wow.
That's why Panditji had to give a glossary of Sanskrit words in Sri Aurobindo, just putting some meaning somewhere. Sri Aurobindo has explained it and he has not left it uninterpreted, but he has not given a single word translation for these words. 1500, and what exactly it means by untranslatable, one has to learn from Sri Aurobindo, and how to deal with the untranslatables.
Yes. Fascinating. I'm actually worried that we have so many questions which are pending. I don't want to leave them hanging also. So we'll go to the first question from Maya.
Sri Aurobindo has spoken of the perfection of the Sanskrit language and its importance in understanding the heart of the Indian culture. Mother also wanted children in the ashram to learn a simple Sanskrit that goes back to the roots words. Could you explain the importance of Sanskrit on a child's mental and spiritual development, and also as a tool in unifying India, or even further afield in integrating the broadly Western and Indian mind types? Dr. Sampad?
Yeah, it's beautiful. So, I mean, one can take up this question and then speak everything about Sanskritam in the light of Sri Aurobindo and the mother. Very well drafted question indeed. So, the mother wanted a simple Sanskrit, going back to its root. And also she gave very much importance to the unifying aspect of the language, both Sri Aurobindo and the mother. And of course, the mother, whenever she spoke about Sanskrit or the Veda or the Upanishad, she always said, this is what I had heard from Sri Aurobindo. So, both of them, they had this concern that India needs, not India, just India, but the humanity needs a new language. The world needs a new language. And the new language that they have spoken of, which is rooted in Deva Bhasha, or can be discovered or retrieved, much of the lost components of the original language can be retrieved through this language. That's why so much of importance on the root sounds, root experiences. And the mother didn't believe and didn't encourage to use a simplified Sanskrit, but a simple Sanskrit. Simple by going back its root sounds. In the language, just to give little, explanation, what does it mean by a simple language, not a simplified language? Okay. Every language has these two forms, a simple form of it and a difficult form of it. And Sanskrit, in a sense, is truly difficult language if we dive deep into the hardcore design of it. Very difficult. Difficult for whom? Difficult for those who are not yet ready, those who have not worked out, have not done much for the expansion of their consciousness, those who have never used language with awareness. The same way Sri Aurobindo is also difficult, but not for all, but for those who are not yet ready, those who are not open. And once one opens up to the higher consciousness, the language becomes very, very simple. That's how, like many, think of Kabir, think of many illiterate people, how they have entered into the spirit of the message of the Veda, message of Sanatana Dharma. Think of Babaji Maharaj, who was in ashram, who had no formal education, but he could dive deep into Sri Aurobindo's Savitri, Life Divine, and the simplicity with which he explained it to the people of Odisha. Not many professors would, could do that with so much of knowledge of English. So even Sanskrit becomes very, very simple when we open up to higher consciousness. It works in both ways. We start approaching it with purity, with sincerity, with awareness, with intensity in our aspiration of learning it. And the language itself, because of the purity of the vibration, because it contains the most fundamental sounds of the universe. So it starts impacting, purifying, refining the very consciousness. That's why the children, when they're exposed to Sanskritam, the power of this language is such that it immediately starts refining and shaping the very consciousness and the different faculties through which the consciousness operates of the children right from the childhood. That's why so much of importance the mother has given that every child has to know it. She should at least hear in the ashram. Every child has to learn it. That's why Sanskritam is compulsory in our school. Yeah. And all those who have taken it up and see how, even though little bit, one doesn't become a master of the language, but if one has that Shraddha, one has that, sincerity, that love for the language, then the language itself, it does amazing thing to the very consciousness. So I myself have seen experimenting it on many children, especially the children with special need, the autistic children, children with speech-related disorders and disabilities, the children having behavioral problems. The moment Sanskritam is introduced to them on a regular basis, and I see what tremendous amount of change one finds in those children. The parents become very, very happy. There are so many parents who are extremely grateful to the tradition, to our rishis, because they have given us this language. It's a blessing upon the humanity. So it has, because of its very design, it's not a mental construct. It is not designed by a limited mind. It's a Swayambhu, self-designed language. In a higher consciousness, the vibrations, the sounds, they become self-organized. Like in the nature, we find that there is a self-organizing mechanism in the nature. In the higher consciousness also, the sounds have a self-organizing nature mechanism by which everything falls into a kind of pattern, rhythmic, poetic pattern. That's what happens when a rishi in deeper contemplation sees some aspect of the truth or hears certain aspects of the truth, or he actually has, he's in a state where something is getting revealed. So the vibrations which are created because of that realization, so they become self-organized into very rhythmic patterns, and we call those as mantras. That's why mantras are not written by anyone. The self-organized sounds happens in a very deeper state of contemplation. So opening the children to such a treasure, it takes care of their, like integral growth. Every aspect, the purity of the vibration of the sounds, it has a direct impact on refining many aspects of the physical. Because the impact goes till the cellular level, penetrating through various layers. That's why, like when the mother was doing the cellular transformation, like the mantra, Om Namo Bhagavate, it was not chosen, it comes naturally. That's the mantra. That's how it has got organized, self-organized. And look at the power of those words, Om Namo Bhagavate. Extremely powerful mantra. So that's what happens when we expose the children to such a refined, such a powerful language, which belongs to a higher consciousness or which comes from a higher consciousness, has the power to refine the consciousness. it does amazing thing to the children, shaping their consciousness, refining their consciousness. This is one aspect which I have seen whenever children are exposed to the language. And then, while introducing Sanskritam to the children, one has to be very careful of the content that we are giving to the children. It's not just, tell them some stories, some nursery rhymes or something like that. The content also matters. Look at in the ancient Gurukulas, what kind of content they gave to the children. They were asked to rote learn the Ashtadhyay of Panini, Amara Kosha of Amara Singh, all the Veda mantras, the Upanishads, rich in content. So, even though we do not expose them to, such vast amount of content, but at least certain content of the Veda, the Upanishad, of the Gita, of Amara Kosha, of Ashtadhyay, very rich content, having certain simplicity. So when we turn to the Upanishad, then we find the expressions like Satyam, Vada, Dharmam, Chara. What difficulty is there in understanding this? With
Please
such
translate those two.
Yes, with such simplicity, it has come through the mouth of the Rishi. Satyam Vada, speak the truth. Dharmam Chara, follow the Dharma, path of Dharma. Swadhyaya Nama Pramada, do not deviate from doing Swadhyaya, contemplating on whatever one is studying. So there are many, many simple mantras, rich in content, very rhythmic. Those can be given to the children right from the childhood, along with the various vocabularies and then Vyavaharik Vakyas, for day-to-day use. The children need to be introduced in a very different way, but one has to choose the content very consciously. Then it happens nicely. So that is the reason why the Deva Bhasha curriculum, which is designed to teach Sanskritam to the children from playgroup to class 8, those 11 books, the content is extremely different. You can compare it. One can compare the content of Deva Bhasha books with the content of other textbooks available in Bharat. And the whole design of the curriculum, keeping at the center India's pedagogical philosophy, keeping in mind the Swabhava and Swadharma of the Bhasha itself. So we need to rethink, we need to redesign, we need to realign ourselves with the very Swabhava and Swadharma of the language. And once that alignment happens, Sanskritam becomes very, very easy for anyone.
And this is aligning to the spiritual roots of the civilization at the same time. And if you had, for example, today a modern training program, the first thing they would do is they would take something from the Western framework of education and translate into Sanskrit and replicate that, which is exactly what should not be done from what you've just said. I want to highlight this one point that Sampadananda has said, that there is a underlying structure to the language itself which is spontaneous, natural, which we have been discussing earlier. And so he said there is a self-correcting mechanism, because the moment you try to express in a way that comes spontaneously, things slot themselves into the natural rhythm, underlying truths. And this you see in the root sounds, inevitably any word you use or even any word you hear, you will tend to draw back into their root sense. So as a language, the Sanskrit has this tendency to always draw you to a deeper and a more intuitive level. And so when he's saying that the content itself should be carefully chosen, you provide content which has similar depth. So it could be understood by a child on a certain level of understanding according to his current understanding. And as he grows up, with the deepening that the language would bring, the content and the meaning also would deepen. I don't know if that aligns with what you're saying.
Even at the same time, you see, like when children are going to the ashram school, in the kindergarten, we teach them, the teachers there, they teach them the first mantra of Rig Veda. They don't tell them the meaning of the mantra, but the way it is taught in the classroom, the teacher will sit and then say that Om Agni Mile Purohitam, the flame rising up. It's understood by the children that it's something about the flame. That's enough for a child. Then the mantra itself will take care of it. So there is a way that we can bring this rich content, because every word here, even like there was the discussion about Agni, elaborate discussion on it in the previous sessions. The very word itself, look at the kind of intuitive, psychological, occult contents that it carries within itself. And a constant repetition of the word through hearing and through repeating, as Sri Aurobindo says, that even though without knowing the meaning, if someone constantly repeats these words, the vibration and the rhythm, the intensity of the rhythm and the intensity and purity of the vibration of the sounds, it starts preparing the mind for the realization, he says. Even it starts creating the new neurons which are needed for the realization of the truth behind every word. That's why in our tradition we have this whole idea of Purascharana, that keep repeating it for 1 crore times, 3 lakhs times. Even though one doesn't understand, but with little devotion, sincerity, carrying that intensity in the aspiration, if one does it, what Sri Aurobindo says, that it starts preparing the whole consciousness for the realization of the truth which the word carries within itself. And just imagine if a child is repeating these words or coming in contact with such rich words of Sanskritam, what it will do to the child.
Yes.
So this is where like we should definitely introduce and make it compulsory, as the mother says, to the children using simple Sanskritam rich in content and in a child-friendly manner. The whole content delivery mechanism has to be very different. So then the child learns the language and the language becomes an integral part of the child, shaping its consciousness.
This brings us to the question from Luke, which we can take.
That
From Luke, apart from 49 notebooks written by Sri Aurobindo, could you advise an accessible way for beginners to explore the Deva Bhasha?
Okay. Good. Yes, there are plenty of materials which are available today on the internet with free access. There are a lot of YouTube videos, there are a lot of texts, various ways of teaching Sanskritam. But one also has to be careful in choosing the content that that can enrich. So most of the materials which are available, uh, though they help us, like getting into the language, but as I said, that richness of content is lacking. And the content delivery mechanism does lack innovation. And innovation is not just mix and match and doing some, showing some graphs and tables and this. But the true innovation actually enlightens. It brings a fresh insight into in whichever field this innovation takes place. Very fresh insight. It's very heartening, very freshening, refreshing when we have some innovative ways of getting into any subject. And here, there are plenty of materials which are available, but when it comes to whether there is something in the light of Sri Aurobindo, so where whatever little bit that I myself have attempted to work on the content in the light of Sri Aurobindo and the Mother, I would say the 11 textbooks which I have created, known as Deva Bhasha, they are implemented in hundreds of schools now, and thousands of people have purchased the sets of Deva Bhasha all over the world to learn Sanskrit. It's not a self-taught book, but the way the content is designed, if someone contemplates on it, can understand much of it. So these 11 textbooks are implemented in the schools which agree to teach Sanskrit compulsorily from playgroup to class 8. And the content that we have, let me just give you a little bit idea about the content, that all the parts of the speech, they're covered, so then one has a complete idea about how Sanskrit operates as a language. Second, whether it is from play group or in the class 8, every book at every level has certain mantras from the Veda, from Upanishads, from Gita, and the words also from Amarakosha, where when we are introducing a certain word, we're also explaining that each and every word in Sanskrit is self-explanatory. Each and every word is conscious of its own history. That's the idea which we have brought through the introduction to Amarakosha in a different way. Suppose we have taken
Please explain the word Amarakosha. Many will not know.
Amarakosha is a thesaurus in Sanskrit which gives the paryaya shabdas. That means, like, for suppose there are 100 words for a particular object, a particular idea, those are listed under a section. So if one wants to find out how many different words are there for space, for earth, for fire, so one has to turn to Amarakosha, which is written by Amara Simha. That's why it is known as Amarakosha. Amara means immortal again. So when we are introducing this to the children, so how it happens traditionally? Traditionally, the children are given the whole verse containing, say, 30 words or 40 words for a particular object are given to the children. So the children wrote learn the entire verse. Agner Vaishwanaro Vanni. So like this, they will continue. But when we are introducing through Deva Bhasha, we are just taking only 5 words. Say 5 words out of 34 words for Agni given in the Amarakosha, we have taken only 5 words. Then those 5 words are explained. Agni is because of its Urdhva Gamana, because of its upward movement, it's known as Agni. Or it is Vahni because it carries the prayers and makes it reach to other gods. It is known as Shushma because it comes from the root sound because it dries up everything. Or it's called Anala. It is an all-devouring entity, so which can swallow the entire creation into itself. So na alam, nothing is enough for it. So it's known as Anala. So that's how we have explained the words. So a child learning Sanskritam right from the beginning knows that the child has the right to ask this question, why hand is called hasta, or nose is called nasika, or ear is called karna, which he cannot ask in the English class. And the words are very well explained. they know that there is a logic behind the formation of the words. So that we make them aware right from their childhood through these textbooks. And full of very beautiful stories, the inspiring stories of the Mahapurushas, inspiring stories from the tradition, from the scientific heritage, linking them with the nature. So it's a very well designed, very thoughtfully designed curriculum for teaching Sanskritam from playgroup to class 8. This is one content which I have put a lot of effort. There's another initiative which is an application known as Language Curry. So this is an application which has got 26 levels, and in each level we have various lessons from the most simple one to the complicated one. So, but once one has completed all the 26 levels, so one has a grip over the conversational Sanskrit. And there also, time to time, I keep explaining certain words and the rich content that it has. Then, in addition to this, I also have initiated into 2013 a radio called Divyavani Sanskrit Radio. Divyavani Sanskrit Radio. So you can just Google it, Divyavani, Divya, Divyavani Sanskrit Radio, and it plays. You can tell your Alexa also to plays Divyavani Sanskrit Radio. It plays. It's universally available, and more than 165 countries have access to it. Have accessed so far. So lakhs of people are listening to this on a daily basis, 24/7. It's the first ever Sanskrit radio, 24/7 radio, which I'm handling myself. The
This
content.
also teaches?
No, it doesn't teach.
Okay.
But one keeps listening to, varieties of contents in Sanskrit.
Okay.
Stories, drama,
you need
speeches.
you need to understand Sanskrit to appreciate what is on the
Yeah,
radio.
all those who are learning Sanskrit.
Okay. Yes.
And morning and evening is mostly the stutis, hymns, and devotional songs. So,
But your application, which is called Language Curry, that can be used by someone for learning.
yes, absolutely.
Would
Anyone
you
who has no
recommend?
connection with Sanskrit also can start learning.
Yes. So
And
what I
also, like,
understood,
if
what I saw of
someone
the
wants-
application, just for the viewers, I came to know of this only last week, is that you can learn it from any language. You're learning Sanskrit,
Yeah,
but the application
can-
language itself can be changed to any of many dozens of languages of the world. And within
No,
India,
only
it's
Indian
free.
languages,
Yes.
only Indian languages. So one can learn any Indian language through any Indian language.
Okay. It's limited to that.
English is the only foreign language
Okay. Fine. Yes. Okay.
So there are 12 Indian languages we have introduced so far.
So you can use English to learn Sanskrit, or
Yes.
any Indian language to learn Sanskrit.
Yes.
Okay. And this is the application itself, and what I saw of it is very accessible, and it's a very structured course. You hear the speech, you can repeat, etc. So, but the Devabhasha textbook, do you think someone can use it to learn themselves, or they need a teacher?
Can. One can. If someone is going right from the play group
Okay.
textbook, one can.
Is that available somewhere?
It's available online. One can order the
Okay.
books. So then the publisher will send.
Otherwise, the application itself is something I would highly recommend for those who would like to start learning. See how that works for you. We have also, I want to observe this 2 points which just came up earlier when you said that in this textbook, the children can ask, why is a word called that way? And this is a question which cannot be asked in any other language. You take English, you take any other, generally let's say European languages. Why does an ear is called ear or nose is called nose? Why? It's arbitrary, that's how it is. But in the Sanskrit, you can ask that question. And this is the amazing thing. And just this shows you something so extraordinary that is native to the language itself, that it shapes the thinking the thought power of the child is shaped from early childhood. The moment you're learning a vocabulary, you're not merely blindly memorizing things, you're also made to think of why this word corresponds to this, and the thought power itself is activated at an early stage. So I want to comment on this because it links to the whole question which Maya also asked, the mind type and the shaping of the mind from Sanskrit. And I would like to ask you this question because you think in Sanskrit, you think out of Sanskrit, and you have learnt English later. So what does it feel like to think in Sanskrit versus think in English? Is there a difference that you feel? Do you notice a difference between people who know Sanskrit and think through that, people who know English only and think through that?
It does a big difference. So much of the original ideas, when like I contemplate on in Sanskrit, so the clarity with which the exploration happens, or the ideas come, or I'm able to give expression to sometimes, is very different from like if I think in English and then try to express in Sanskrit, or think in Sanskrit and then give expression to English. I mean, that happens like whichever language we are using, if the thoughts are also appearing in that language, if we have that mechanism of thinking through that language, the expression is rich. And the translation mechanism doesn't do good. So I find it very, very difficult translating. Even sometimes translating the Indian languages to Sanskritam. Sanskritam to Indian language is easy, but an Indian language to Sanskritam is extremely difficult. Even though Indian languages have too much affinity with Sanskritam, yet there are many expressions which are difficult to translate. So, for example, like if I'm reading a text in Hindi, we say like "Usne mera pit thap thapaya." It's very difficult to translate into Sanskrit.
So
Literally,
just can you
this
translate so people understand what that means?
yeah, that like he patted on my back, like pit thap thapaya. So but the word thap thapaya, the sense, the emotion, the feel that it brings in the regional language, it may not bring the same when we translate it exactly, imitating it. So it has to be a very different way.
But why
Maybe
is it easier to translate from Sanskrit to the other language?
yeah, why it is needed, like sometimes to preserve many texts which are available in other Indian languages in Sanskritam, to increase the volumes of the books in Sanskritam.
Okay. No, I was asking why is it easier? You said it's easier to translate from Sanskrit to the
From
regional language.
Sanskrit to Indian languages, because we have great familiarity with our own mother tongue,
Okay.
and
Because the
understanding
language already has the
we can
Sanskrit
convert
words.
it. Yes.
Okay.
So the idiomatic expressions, which are very, very, like we're familiar with the regional languages. So we are not very much familiar with the idiomatic expressions in Sanskrit. So the Shastras can be explained very easily through Sanskrit. But when it comes to the Vyavaharika Bhasha, day-to-day conversation and the idiomatic expressions, it's difficult because it's not a part of our life. So maybe one day it was.
Yes.
So during that time it was easy. So that's why when we go back to read the ancient plays, the dramas in Sanskrit, or the novels in Sanskrit, the ancient, like Banavatta's Kadambari or Dashakumar Charitam. So these are some great novels in Sanskrit.
So we have a question in the chat box from Devotee. You said that by repeating a Sanskrit word, even if one is not conscious of its meaning, it awakens the consciousness. Can you please suggest a word, phrase, or sentence that we can begin with?
Can we?
A word, phrase, or sentence that we can begin with for this purpose of repeating so that it awakens the consciousness.
Yeah, any word. One can choose any word, any sentence, any mantra.
So she's
So,
asking you to suggest something which would be a good start.
yeah, I mean, one can start with the first mantra of Rig Veda.
Okay.
So that's also a very good start.
Mhm.
Or you start with the Gayatri mantra because many people are familiar with that. Or start with a particular word, maybe the word dharma. Like I started my contemplation, my first word in my Shabda sadhana was the word Shraddha. It was the most beautiful word. And that word, it took, I think, 3 months I did contemplate on the word Shraddha. And when the meaning got revealed, and then when I went to Sri Aurobindo to read, Sri Aurobindo is a confirmation to what you realize within. Because he has already realized. The Veda is a confirmation. Like for Sri Aurobindo, the Veda was a confirmation to his own spiritual realizations. The same way, most of the times, the ideas, the different things that we get, something gets revealed to us. When we turn to Sri Aurobindo himself is a confirmation and adds more clarity to that little understanding that we get through the sadhana. So my first word was Shraddha, and usually translated as faith, devotion, concentration, reverence. But Shraddha has a very different meaning from the root point of view. So the meaning which got revealed, and then later I wrote a note about it, the Shraddha. So it has got two components in it, Shraddha and Dha. The sound Dha has that root sense of holding on to, clasping, grasping, clinging, okay, holding on to. And what is Shraddha? The word Shraddha has lost its, like appearance, independent appearance in the classical Sanskrit. You will not find in any classical Sanskrit dictionary the word Shraddha or independent use of the word Shraddha. But in the Veda one has Shraddha, Te, Dadhami. So like you have the mantras. But Shraddha is used independently. And Shraddha means it's the equivalent of the word Satya, truth. And Shraddha means holding on to the truth. And then once this meaning came, just reverberating that hold on to truth, hold on to the truth. And when we come down from Sri Aurobindo's room, so the message is cling to truth. I said, this is what the Shraddha is demanded from everyone, that cling to truth. And this helped me to evaluate myself, how much Shraddha I have. Because without Shraddha, nothing can happen, no progress can happen. Shraddhavan labhate jnanam, when the Gita says that he who has Shraddha can attain to the real knowledge, it's not a mere expression. It's a lifetime sadhana to become Shraddhavan, holding on to the truth. And Sri Aurobindo explains it in the book The Mother very beautifully. That one part of your being says yes, and the other part refuses to participate with it, collaborate with it, then know that you are not in truth. That's not Shraddha. In a state of Shraddha, each and every part of the being is aligned with the rest of the part. There's no confusion. There's no doubt. Each and every part of the being, they come forward together in participating and collaborating with the central aspiration. That's the state of Shraddha. Then one is Shraddhavan. So everyone has Shraddha. Shraddha mayoyam Purusha. The Purusha is full with Shraddha. Yo yat Shraddha sa eva sa. Depending upon the degree to which we are aware of our Shraddha, or we are well settled in our Shraddha, depending on that, we have the result. Yo yat Shraddha sa eva sa. So that is why the Vedic Rishi, it worships Shraddha, this force. Shraddha is a very deep spiritual force. It worships and looks at it as a Devi and then says Shraddham Pradar Havamahe. O Shraddha Devi, in the morning I invoke. Shraddham Madhyandinam Pari, throughout the midday I invoke you. Shraddham Suryasya Nimruji, at the setting of the sun I invoke. Shraddhe Shraddhapaye Hana. O Shraddha Devi, be well settled in me. Make me Shraddhavan. That's the prayer. And when you turn to Sri Aurobindo, like I have a passage from Sri Aurobindo here on this, which I would like to read out. Sri Aurobindo says, even while explaining the word faith, he said the perfect faith is an ascent of the whole being to the truth seen by it or offered to its acceptance. And its central working is a faith of the soul in its own will to be and attain, and become. This soul faith, in some form of itself, is indispensable to the action of the being, and without it, man cannot move a single pace in life, much less take any step forward to a yet unrealized perfection. It is so central and essential a thing that the Gita can justly say of it that whatever is a man's Shraddha that he is, yo yat Shraddha sa eva sa. And it may be added, whatever he has the faith to see as possible in himself and strive for, that he can create and become. Yo yat Shraddha sa eva sa. While explaining this, Sri Aurobindo writes this as a little explanation. So, this single word, it opens up a vast ocean before us to enter into the spirit of it. And the word itself, as Tanum Vibrunute Swam, it opens up its own body to enter into it. So that's what happens as a culmination in the Shabda Sadhana.
Beautiful. This is an excellent example of the self-revelatory character of Sanskrit. In English, if you said faith, what does it mean? You have to replace by another word, which if you don't know, you replace by another word. Here, you saw how he decomposed the word into its roots and the meaning revealed itself. And this is so amazing. This will be, I suppose, a good example of the kinds of words, untranslatable words that you will be sharing in your course. And I had actually thought to ask him some examples of such spiritually revelatory character of terms in Sanskrit. But we are short on time, and I don't know if we would have a right to ask you to have another session with us, or should we go to some of the other questions and wind it up?
We can go to another question, and if needed, we can.
You would be okay to have another session?
Convenient time, we can have another session.
It will be the same time. It will be Saturday next. Do you think it's possible?
No, next is not possible.
Or the one after?
I have to see which
day. So let's do one thing. We will keep at a later stage, a later date, another session with you. But then just for this moment, I would like to ask a couple of other questions. One is, this was an example of a spiritually revelatory word. But we have a few questions regarding the meters. And Sri Aurobindo has written about this also. but only somebody like you who has actually steeped in the rhythm of the language itself that you could comment on. So I would like to ask you if you could share an example of some of the traditional rhythms in which verses or shlokas or mantras have been articulated, and these are often named with specific names which indicate some cosmic rhythm that they correspond to. Could you share with us some example of these, and whether there is some equivalent in English or whether there's a difference?
Okay. So this itself is a vast topic, maybe
You have a whole book on this, I understand.
whole book, and then we can even have one full session on this,
Okay.
the
So
idea of chandas.
shall
But
we
very
keep this for
briefly,
later then?
yeah, but very briefly, I
Okay.
can give a
Yes.
little
Yes. Okay.
introduction to it,
Yes.
and the elaborate aspect of it we can take up later. So the meter, like in English, it is called meter, but in Sanskrit, it is called chandas. And the word chandas comes from a root sound which means to gladden, to make one happy. So anything that makes us happy in a true sense is chandas. In the sense that wherever there is harmony, there is rhythm, there is beauty, then you have the chandas. Chandas is all about harmony. Chandas is all about beauty. Chandas is all about perfection. Chandas is all about that rhythmic movement. It's a universal, rhythmic, harmonious movement which sustains everything in the creation. The grahas and nakshatras that you see, the grahas orbiting, there is a chandas in it. The seasons coming one after another, there is chandas in it. The breath, the heartbeat, the pulse, there is chandas in it. And when there is a loss of these chandas at an individual level, we fall sick. At a cosmic level, we have many natural calamities. It's only the chandas which have that power of sustainability. Anything which is cast into this mold of chandas, rhythmic patterns, they become immortal. That's why our yoga, pranayama, everything is to bring every part of our being, every aspect of our being into a state of rhythm, into a harmonious state. Yesterday, someone, while during some conversation, someone said, one can count one's heartbeats or increase, decrease, or it doesn't matter, but our breaths are predetermined. And if you want to increase your lifespan, you slow down your breaths and bring more rhythm to your breaths. So that's how you bring sustainability to yourself, and immortality is added to your own journey, your own life. And Sri Aurobindo speaks of a cosmic meter, a Vaishwa Chandas. And he says, from the Chandas itself, the entire creation comes and is sustained. And whatever little patterns, rhythmic patterns that we have in music, in sculpture, in architecture, in dance, in poetry, in the nature, they are small, small representatives of that cosmic meter. The whole purpose of poetry is to make us aware of or link us with that great cosmic meter. The purpose of music, architecture, drawing, painting, nature, sculpture, dance, yoga, pranayama, these are all, like rhythmic patterns. So everything helps us to grow more and more aware of that cosmic meter and become one with it. That is the whole idea behind the chandas. That's why in Sanskrit, when one comes, there is infinite varieties of chandas. If someone asks how many chandas, very difficult to answer. There's no answer. Only the word infinity can be the answer. But there are certain recognized chandas. And when we analyze the names of the chandas, they have a great resemblance with something which exists in the nature. I'll just give one example before we conclude this aspect of the chandas. So, while teaching it to the children or anyone in my classroom, I teach it in a very different way. I ask this question: do you know, like, how many times this snake moves straight and how many times it moves curved? Straight. Snake moving straight, no one has ever seen. It always makes a crooked movement, zigzag. But if the snake is not making any straight movement, it cannot reach from one destination to other destination. Somewhere it has to straighten itself in order to give direction to its movement. So from this end to the other end, it reaches. So if it is always circular or crooked, then it will be revolving round and round and round. So it has to reach from one destination to the other destination. Then I really watched some of the snake episodes where slow down movements, some snake experts I consulted to find out what exactly is the movement of the snake. Why I did this? Because in Sanskrit, someone must have felt a kind of rhythm, this rhythmic movement of the snake, and recognized it as a rhythmic pattern that exists in the nature and translated that whole pattern into the language and created a metrical pattern and named it as Bhujanga Prayatam. Bhujanga means snake, Prayatam means movement. And many poets have composed beautiful verses in Bhujanga Prayatam. One of the famous examples is Shankaracharya's Bhavanyashtakam, which is na tato, na mata, na bandhur, na data. So I'll come back to it with a little more explanation. Like a snake moves once straight and 2 times curve and repeats it 4 times. Then one cycle of its movement is over, takes rest, and then again begins its movement. So one straight means short, 2 times curved means long. So in the metrical pattern here, one finds one short syllable followed by 2 long syllables, 4 times repeated. So it's a 12 syllable meter. Okay. So na, ta, to, na, ma, ta, na, bandhur, na, da, ta. So one almost feels the rhythmic movement of the snake while reciting this. So it's called Bhujanga Prayata. It is through the chandas, it's very interesting that the children can be exposed to many undiscovered knowledge about the nature. They can grow more conscious of the nature. So I'll just recite this verse. Na tato na mata na bandhur na data na putro na putri na bhrityo na bharta na jaya na vidya na vrittir mameva Gatistvam gatistvam tvameka bhavani. Gatistvam gatistvam tvameka bhavani. So this is how the Bhujanga Prayata verses are repeated. But one more important thing is that a verse composed in a particular meter, the meter has a very rigid structure, but within that rigid structure, there's immense flexibility. The same thing applies to the design of the Sanskrit language also. It has a very hardcore design, very rigid, but within that, there's immense flexibility. So a verse composed in a particular meter can be sung in 100 different ways. If someone tells you, no, this is the way Bhujanga Prayat has to be recited, it's not right. Bhujanga Prayat can be recited in 100 different ways without compromising the short, long, the Laghu Guru, or the light and heavy sounds, without compromising with the Yati, the sentential and harmonic pauses. That's the beauty of the language. That's the beauty of the metrical patterns called chandas. So that's a little introduction to the chandas. We can have a separate session.
Very tempting to have longer elaborations.
And
We'll take.
just 1 minute, like
Yes.
on the chandas, I have a series of 5 lectures which are available on the internet. So where I'm explaining the chandas right from the beginning, like one can learn about the chandas through these videos. I will share the links later.
Perfect. Yes, I'll add the links to the description box later as soon as I get it from you. Otherwise, I'll put it in the next session's description box. We would like one more question. This is from Revati. If you can take that, Alina.
Yes.
We have a question. What would the words aim, rim, and shrim means, sir? They sound extremely powerful.
What do the words?
Rim,
Aim,
shrim.
Hrim, Shrim, the mantras. Because
Aim,
these things have
Hrim.
no meaning in the normal sense of the language, and yet they're implicit in the language as the root mantras.
Okay. Okay. So, yes, there's a lot which can be said about this whole mantra. Om, Aim, Hrim, Shrim, Klim. This is the whole pattern, the full
I'll just
mantra.
add to that to expand the question. Where do these sounds come from? Because they are not natural sounds in the Sanskrit language. This
Yeah.
Aim, Shrim, etc.
Yes. So the full mantra is Om, Aim, Hrim, Shrim, Klim, where Om, Aim, Hrim, Shrim, Klim. These are the 5 Bija mantras. Okay. So these 5 Bija mantras, the first thing is that the Bija mantras, the seed mantras, are composed of the primal sounds, the fundamental sounds of Sanskrit, which one finds in the Varnamala. The combination of that. Sometimes without combinations also, like im, they are also Bija mantras. Each syllable in the Varnamala, each phoneme in the Varnamala with the combination of Anuswara and Visarga also serve the Bija mantras. And particularly here, Om is also a Bija mantra. Aim is a Bija mantra. Hrim is a Bija mantra. They are the combinations of, again, the primal sounds which are there in the Varnamala. That's the first explanation. Second is that each one has its own significance. It's connected with a particular deity, connected with a particular part of the consciousness, serves certain purpose. Okay. So sometimes in the tradition, you see that all the 5, each one of them is connected with a particular prana. Like Om is connected with the prana in general. Like Aim is connected with, say, Udana prana. So the Pancha Pranas are connected with these 5 mantras.
Just to briefly interrupt, he's speaking of the 5 operations of the prana within the human working, which Sri Aurobindo elaborates upon: prana, apana, samana, udana, and vyana. These are elaborated by Sri Aurobindo in their working, but he's referring to this. And the word bija, I'm just doing it for the translation, those who may not know these terms. Bija means seed. So these are called bija mantras, they're seed mantras. Maybe we can also ask you why they're called seed mantras. Please continue, I interrupted.
Yeah. So they are called bija mantras. These sounds are called bija because they are the seed. They are the potential sounds from which all other sounds emerge, all other words emerge. Like from a seed, the tree evolves. So the same way, these are the potential sounds. They work like the seed. So from which an entire tree can bloom. Okay. And say it needs actually much time to get into the elaborate discussion on the 5 mantras, but very briefly I will touch upon. Om is a mantra which is the mantra of Shiva, Mahadeva. That's why Mahadeva has another name called Omkar. He is the Omkar. So you have the Omkarishwara, okay, form of the Mahadeva. It also applies to Vishnu and Brahma. So Om is always with the male power, the Purusha Shakti. Okay, so it goes with Brahma, Vishnu, Maheshwara. And Aim, Hrim, Klim, Srim, they are the Shakti Bijas. So they're with Shakti. So for example, like Aim is connected with Mahasaraswati. Shrim is connected with Mahalakshmi. And Hrim is connected with like Durga, Parvati, and many other forms of devatas. And Klim is connected with Tripura Sundari, one of the Dasha Mahavidyas. So like this, like the different functioning of these deities, the different functioning of the pranas, whatever impact or whatever happens by worshipping, by doing the upasana of these deities, one gets the same benefits by repeating these bija mantras. So, say for example, like Srim is the bija mantra of Mahalakshmi, and Mahalakshmi represents harmony, beauty, prosperity. So, by repeating these mantras, so in one's own consciousness, this whole aspect of harmony, beauty, prosperity, they manifest. This is the power of these bija mantras. They manifest these aspects of the consciousness in the sadhaka. So this is what is little explanation.
Just a quick question. When you say Shrim is associated with Mahalakshmi aspect, is it somehow related to the sound quality of Shara, Ima?
Yeah.
Can you explain that?
Is a little deeper discussion. Like Shri, like we have to break it down again to Shri coming to Sa, Ra, and E, long E. But the word Shri itself, from which many words which are derived, in its root sense, they refer to prosperity, they refer to light, wisdom, power, beauty, harmony. These are the root senses of the word Shri. And Shri also means the support. So the word Ashraya also comes from the same root sound, Shraya, Ashraya. Because without these aspects like harmony, beauty, prosperity, light, wisdom, there's no support. All these become the support of our existence, our growth. This is how we move on the path of the truth. And they bring like the repetition of this, so they bring these bounties, these spiritual riches. the harmony, peace, beauty, light, wisdom. These are in the Vedic language, they are known as Rai. Rai means the spiritual wealth. So they manifest in the consciousness of the sadhaka who sincerely, with devotion, with dedication, keeps repeating, invoking the power of Mahalakshmi through this Bija mantra. Shri.
Fascinating. We have a couple of questions about the historical aspect of Sanskrit. We can take Bharata's question.
Did people in Indus Valley civilization in Bronze Age India speak or use Vedic Sanskrit language?
And to that I will add, in the chat box, Bruno has asked, can you please tell us the origin of Sanskrit? Does it come from an older language or did it appear directly from its own origin?
First thing is that when we were students and then reading the history of language, theories of language, so that gave a very different sense, the division of languages based on many factors, internal and external. And after coming to Sri Aurobindo, the idea of history, it gets closed. Historicity doesn't really serve any purpose, and it's very difficult to say anything about the history of something which we haven't seen. Though there are tools and measures by which people arrive at certain date or certain community or certain place, but it doesn't really serve any purpose. So that's why I myself personally do not enter into the historicity of anything. But there are plenty of literature which are available. Yes, now this Yajnavedam, who has deciphered or has made some good attempt in deciphering in the script. He confirms that these were the languages. I mean, Sanskritam was the language. The Vedic Sanskrit was the language. This is the recent discovery by one Yajnavedam, who has been doing the research on deciphering the script, and slowly he shows that why this is vrittam or why this is a yantram or why this can be something like that. He has put it very logically. So far, no one has done this kind of work. So in one sense, if we accept that as some truth in it, in his research, yes, during that time, it was the Vedic Sanskrit which was in use. Coming to Sri Aurobindo says that he always gave emphasis on the divine origin of things. He says that like everything else has originated, the language also has originated, has a divine origin of its own. So difficult to say, but he puts it in a Satya Yuga. He uses the word Satya Yuga. And again, to understand what is Satya Yuga, Sri Aurobindo has a very different explanation. The Yuga system itself, it doesn't comply with the mathematical calculation of the yugas as we find in the Puranas or popular tradition. So to him, like if we think of our journey like a pyramid, like attaining to a peak is a Satya. And there have been so many Satyas, so many Satya Yugas. And in each Yuga, all the 4 Yugas live. There's no perfect Kali, there's no perfect Satya, there's no perfect Dwapara, perfect Treta. So everyone you'll find at all the times, all those who have reached the peak, they have attained to the Satya. And once one attains to the peak, there's the higher peak, a higher perfection is waiting for realization. And there is no direct flight from peak to peak. One has to go through all the ups and downs in order to attain to the other higher peak. And then another higher peak is visible. And it's so beautifully, one finds it in this expression of the Veda, Yat Sanu Maruhat. Attaining to peaks after peaks, our journey continues. So, when we say Satya, it refers to the light. In Satya Yuga, there is no need of code of conduct. All the Smriti Shastras, the codes of conduct, they are meant for the other yugas. So in Satya Yuga, everyone is driven by the Satya, driven by the true knowledge, the purity. So imagine like where there is the true purity, true knowledge, the light. In that, Sanskritam, Deva Bhasha becomes the language. That's the origin there. In a higher consciousness, so when a higher consciousness descends, it comes with its own language. It is aware of its own language. It knows how it can express itself. And the yogis, they catch hold of that language. They know it. It becomes easy for them to learn. That's how Sri Aurobindo masters Sanskrit in few months. So there's a different different way of attaining and entering into the spirit of the language. Because the origin is divine. So through a divine way, by aspiring to manifest the divinity within, which is the very purpose for which we are on the earth, that we can have easy access to the language which has a divine origin. So this is what I have learned from Sri Aurobindo.
Fascinating. There's a question in the chat box, which is from Vaijayanti. She says, is Shraddha same as Vishwas?
Different. Shraddha
Can you
is
explain
clinging
etymology?
to,
Yes.
Shraddha is clinging to the truth. And Vishwas, like later etymologically, the word Vishwas will be like one is comfortably breathing. One doesn't feel the discomfort. Like in someone's presence, I don't feel the discomfort. So that means I have Vishwas. I can breathe comfortably.
Interesting. Can you break the etymology to that?
We, we, we can be Vishesh, we can be special, we can be comfortable also. Shwas, Shwasa is the breathing.
Okay, interesting. Because you see, both these words, I'm just saying for the viewers, both these words are translated as faith. But
Yeah.
they're such different words, unless you go into etymology, you cannot appreciate this distinction. Fast approaching the time limit for our sessions, and we have already gone quite far beyond what is normal. But we will take advantage of your presence for this purpose. I'd kept one question which to me is very important, because you're the only person I know today who can actually give an answer to this in a meaningful way. And the question I have is, could you share some of the unusual and little known aspects of Sanskrit writings of Sri Aurobindo, Kapali Shastriyar and Ganapati Muni?
So when we come to Sri Aurobindo, that he not only interpreted the original works of our Rishi tradition, like the Veda, the Upanishad, the Gita, Ramayana, Mahabharata, some portions of it, Kalidas, Bhartrihari, but he also composed something in original Sanskrit. He was a poet and he had a grip over the language, and it's natural to him that he could come out with Sanskrit. So he has Bhavani Bharati, a wonderful poem, very powerful. But the little known aspect when you say that not many people know about it, when Sri Aurobindo composed Bhavani Bharati, and you will find that many people had this idea that he has composed it in a meter called Upajati, which is fine. And I have written a note about it, my observation, by going through minutely every line of Sri Aurobindo in Bhavani Bharati. All the verses are not in Upajati. Only 81 verses out of 99 are in Upajati. Upajati is the name of a meter. Say, for example, like there is an 11-syllabled meter called Indra Vajra. The name of the meter is Indra Vajra. There's another meter which is called Upendra Vajra, where in Indra Vajra the first syllable is long, in Upendra Vajra the first syllable is short, the rest of the syllables remain same in both the meters.
Please explain Indra Vajra and Upendra
Indra
Vajra.
Vajra, like Indra's thunderbolt. Why this meter is named as Indra's thunderbolt? Because Indra's Vajra is it creates a sense of, like very strong, very powerful. Okay. So every metrical pattern evokes certain emotional and spiritual, atmosphere. So Indra Vajra pattern is extremely useful in giving expression to heroic strength, heroism, the Veera Rasa, because of the arrangement of the syllables, and intense devotion. Intense devotion. So when someone sings in Indra Vajra, one can feel the power of it.
You were speaking of Bhavani Bharati earlier.
Yeah, Bhavani Bharati. So when we say Upajati, Indra Vajra, so there can be 3 lines of Indra Vajra and 1 line in Upendra Vajra. When there is a mixture of 2 meters, it's called Upajati. Sri Aurobindo has used it because it gives immense flexibility. That's allowed in the tradition. But Upajati itself has 14 different varieties. Suppose the first line is Indra Vajra, rest 3 are Upendra Vajra, it's one variety. First 2 lines are Indra Vajra and next 2 lines are Upendra Vajra, it's a different variety. So like this, the 14 different varieties of Indra Vajra accepted by the tradition.
The rhythms of rhythms.
Yes. The different permutations, combinations of 2 different metrical patterns. And very fascinatingly, Sri Aurobindo has used all the 14 varieties in Bhavani Bharati. That's a little known aspect about Sri Aurobindo.
Amazing.
And what kind of grip he had over the metrical patterns. Okay. That's what makes this poem very, very beautiful. And also he has used very powerful Vedic words into this poem many times. So it makes it powerful. Then he has one Upanishad in Sri Aurobindo Upanishad entirely in Sanskrit and Upanishadic style. And when we come to Ganapati Muni, who had deep association with Sri Aurobindo and the mother, and the foremost disciple of Ramana Maharshi, and Kapali Shastri was a disciple of Ganapati Muni, who came and settled in the ashram. Sri Aurobindo, when he was given a copy of Ganapati Muni's, most prominent poem called Uma Sahasram, which he composed as a Guru Dakshina to his Guru when he met Ramana Maharshi and accepted him as his Guru and named him as Bhagavan Ramana Maharshi. He thought that I have to pay my Guru Dakshina, and Uma Sahasram is the Guru Dakshina that he has offered to Ramana Maharshi. But at the same time, without Guru's blessings, one cannot even offer the Guru Dakshina. So the entire Uma Sahasram is a blessing of Ramana Maharshi. It is almost dictated by Ramana Maharshi in silence. That's why Ramana Maharshi says, when he says the work is completed, he says that has everything been recorded what I dictated. So there is a silent communication which took place between Ramana Maharshi and Ganapati Muni when this composition was going on. And Ganapati Muni, I'll just say, because I touched upon the metrical patterns of Sri Aurobindo and then Ganapati Muni, very little known aspect of Ganapati Muni's compositions. That if someone is familiar with 25 to 30 different metrical patterns in Sanskrit, one can manage the entire classical Sanskrit, Kalidas, Bhartrihari, or any Sanskrit poet. Right from the beginning till date, no Sanskrit poet has used the number of metrical patterns that Ganapati Muni has used. He has used 71 different metrical patterns, chandas, in his composition.
Wow.
Uma Sahasram itself has got 29 different chandas. It's amazing to see the way he has used the different metrical patterns. And the same when we come to Kapali Shastri, his
Just
composition.
before that, you were narrating an incident when Uma Sahasram was given to Sri Aurobindo.
Yeah. So when it was given to Sri Aurobindo had gone through it and then expressed that it is a superhuman performance and I must meet the poet. That was his expression for Ganapati Muni. And that is how Ganapati Muni came in 1928, 15th of August, had Sri Aurobindo's darshan. And then he described that he found a 500-year-old rishi sitting before him. Divya Purushalu. He came out with this expression in Telugu. That he saw that divine person in front of him. And Kapali Shastriji, when we come to his Sanskrit compositions, it ranges from simple poetic compositions to extreme difficult composition of bhashyas, sutras.
Please explain Bhashya.
Sutras. Yeah. So when we say bhashya, it is a detailed commentary, very comprehensive commentary on a particular mantra or shloka. It's called bhashya. And Kapali Shastri's bhashya is very, very significant when we talk about the Rig Veda. Rig Veda in the light of Sri Aurobindo, the way Sri Aurobindo wanted. So the Siddhanjana bhashya of Kapali Shastri is something which the world hardly knows about it. Even many people in the field of Sanskrit, in the field of Vedas, are unaware of Kapali Shastri Siddhanjana bhashya, which he wrote directly under the guidance and supervision of Sri Aurobindo. When Sri Aurobindo left his body in 1950, after that he stopped composing the bhashyam, saying that who is there to sanction? That means each and every letter in Siddhanjana was seen by Sri Aurobindo, sanctioned by Sri Aurobindo, has the touch of Sri Aurobindo. It's almost like one reading Sri Aurobindo. Like we say that when we read essays on the Gita, it is as if Krishna himself is speaking. So same way Siddhanjana Bhasha, it is Sri Aurobindo himself is speaking in Sanskrit, the entire Veda, through Kapali Shastra. Amazing compositions in Sanskrit. They were very much, like very, very deep into the language and the Shastras and the sadhana. That is how the Bhashya and the Stotras and many other writings in Sanskrit of Kapali Shastri, of Sri Aurobindo, of Ganapati Muni, they carry a lot of values to the humanity, or we can say Like Sri Aurobindo has used a particular phrase about the Gita. He says, this is a text which is yet to liberate the humanity. Same applies to all three of them. Their writings are yet to liberate the humanity. And it's our responsibility to bring the whole world in touch with these writings.
Wow, that was so extraordinary. Thank you, Dr. Sampadananda Mishra. I want to once again highlight for our viewers what an extraordinary work that you have been doing in the sheer volume, depth, scope of the work that you have done for Sanskrit language, in Sanskrit language, in bringing forward the greatness of Sanskrit and making it accessible to people. I have not seen anyone do so much in such a short time and with such depth and quality, which is worthy of a disciple of Sri Aurobindo. The kind of insight Sri Aurobindo brings, very few people have, and then to bring that into this domain and then to be able to articulate and bridge from the world of Sanskrit to English and other languages is something so extraordinary. We read earlier, last time I think, Mother's comment about how Sanskrit should be taught, and when she says that I would like to have a simple Sanskrit taught here, as simple as possible but not simplified, simple by going back to its origin, all the root sounds. And she says, I don't know whether you have anyone here who could do that. In fact, I don't know whether there is anyone in India who could do that. Sri Aurobindo knew. But someone who knows Sanskrit can. I don't know. So I believe that the mother, when she said that, perhaps you were still a child, she has built you up for this work. And this is in the direction what that mother wanted, the work that you have been doing. And again, I do not know anybody who has done so much in such a short time with such depth and quality. So I'm very grateful that you could join us and share all this with all of us. And our viewers get a glimpse also of the scope, quantum and width of knowledge that you have in this space, and that you're able to articulate with such clarity, simplicity, directness, and the depth of humility with which you convey this. It is so precious, it is so valuable, and we have to thank the Divine Mother for creating you, and I hope so much of what needs to be done in this field, she will be able to work through you. Thank you, Sampadananda.
Thank you, Sampadananda. Namaste, good evening.
You are muted, we can't hear you.
Namaste, good evening.
Thank you again. And let's take a moment to concentrate on all that we have received, all that we have heard, and the doors that it opens to our appreciation of the Sanskrit language, of the literature and content that exists in this language, and the extraordinary work that Sri Aurobindo, Kapali Shastriyar, Ganapati Muni have been able to express in and through this language, and also the extraordinary work that Sampadananda is doing to bring all this forward and make available to all of us. Let's stay in a quiet aspiration and gratitude to the Divine Mother for this gift. Namaste, and thank you once again to Dr. Sampadananda Mishra. Thank you.
So, I come out?
Yes, we can hear you. Yes. Just take a moment.